Welcome back, folks. In this entry, we'll be taking a look at Rumpelstiltskin from Shrek Forever After. The biggest con artist of Far, Far Away, this pointy-eared, curly-toed imp proved to be Shrek's greatest opponent thus far, and undoubtedly the most successful for a time. A deceitful and devious character fixated on wealth and power, resorting to unethical contracts to manipulate his victims in order to expedite his rise to the top. When we encounter Stiltskin at the start, we find him to be an outcast, shunned and despised, living in a desolate area surrounded by the only entities who would accept his presence, the witches. Based on the implications given, Stiltskin is currently facing the brunt of his actions, having a bad reputation as a consequence of some unknown misdeeds. If his current trajectory is any indicator of his past, then presumably his mischief was rooted in selling the false promise of instant success, the notion of dreams coming true, with the wooden signs outside his carriage advertising just as much. His choice of shape for windows, the four-leafed clover, also convey a similar emphasis on luck. The Queen mentions that he was recommended by King Midas, and based on the textured patterns on his shirt and the golden linings on his carriage, it might be that he was once associated with royalty in some way, an experience which likely lingered with him, leading to his covetous desire for the throne, a desire likely amplified by his current predicament of having to feed on scraps in the rubbish, which we can assume to have been for some time given the growth in his carnivorous goose. Standing at an estimate of about 3 feet tall, Stiltskin doesn't have much of a commanding presence, but what he lacks in height he makes up for with his boisterous personality and his smooth talk, albeit speaking with a nasal twang and having a look of mischief that betrays any supposed noble intention he puts forth. Of all his physical features, Stiltskin is perhaps the most insecure over 2 aspects. Firstly, his hair, which he does not appear to give too much maintenance to, given its unkempt and scruffy-looking state. The second being his short stature, as we repeatedly find him standing on tables in an effort to level his interaction with others. It's an unfortunate but pervasive fact that taller people tend to command more respect, and it's likely that someone as vertically challenged as Stiltskin would face some insecurity over his stature. Both of these insecurities are mitigated with a recurring accessory, namely his collection of wigs, which serve the dual purpose of providing him with more fanciful hair, and given their length, also serve to artificially boost his height. In his tenure as king, Stiltskin's behavior can be summed up as attention-seeking, with him relishing in the spotlight as the main attraction. This is demonstrated first in the external surroundings of the castle, where the barren and desolate surroundings serve to highlight the castle as the only viable location. Internally, this spotlight effect is noticeable as well, where the ballroom floor is dark and dim except for the light shining on Stiltskin's throne. His choice to adorn the cupcakes in the shape of his wig to serve as a visual reminder of himself also supports this attention-seeking notion. All of this translates to the implied message of "behold me and admire me." When we get down to it, Stiltskin's desire for the throne is not so much for its wealth, but more for fulfilling a need for attention which may have arisen from his insecurities, the full scope of which we can only speculate. Perhaps it's for this need for attention that Stiltskin covets the throne, and will not settle for anything less than the highest position in the kingdom. True, he's at the bottom of the social ladder due to his misdeeds, but I reckon there are ways for him to improve his social standing without nefarious means. Not everyone is aware of his reputation, as we see in the case of Shrek. And even if they are, there are always some who are desperate enough to approach him. With his access to magic, it's possible that there are ways for him to provide fair value to others in exchange for fair compensation. Unfortunately, due to his lofty ambition, he has an all-or-nothing approach and only aims for the throne, a position he was never meant to have. Stiltskin wears his emotions on his sleeve, a sign of his lack of emotional temperance. In his dealings with his prospects, it's plain to see that he has an ulterior motive, with the overflow of his greed being signaled by his external cues, whether it's the squeal of delight as the Frog King was about to sign the contract, or his repeated chanting to Shrek to goad him as he put pen to paper, the act of which would make his longtime dream a reality. Unable to contain the overwhelming excitement, it causes an involuntary bodily response, his toes ripping out from his shoes, a further sign of an absence of emotional control, which we also detect in an instance of unchecked anger, when he slices through the plate in a fit of rage. But this anger isn't too recurring, and certainly not as apparent as his greed. To drive this point back home, the fact that Stiltskin is so easily carried away by his emotions is perhaps an overflow from his general lack of mastery over self. Therefore, traits like discipline, diligence, and commitment elude him, causing him to always seek the easy solution. So in effect, Stiltskin is very much a victim of the same temptation that he dangles like an elusive carrot over the citizens of Far, Far Away, promising them the prospect of instant success. Maybe in some aspect, these traits of mischief can be tied back to his inherent nature as an imp, but this concept hasn't been explored in the setting of the Shrek universe. In his dealings with his prospects, Stiltskin repeatedly knows the right buttons to push, showing how well versed he is in the art of persuasion. With the king and queen, he gets right down to it, implying that their reluctance to sign away their kingdom is an indicator that they don't love their daughter. With Shrek, he panders to his need to be respected, and shrewdly gives him a sample of this via an act of cowardice to whet his appetite. There's a saying that if you don't have the ability to walk away, then you have no means to negotiate. Stiltskin is aware of this, and he uses it to his advantage, telling a skeptical Shrek that they don't have to make the contract if he doesn't want to, which serves to put a pause on his skepticism. For Stiltskin's deception, his greatest weapons are the ambiguity of the contractual terms and his reinterpretation of them to suit his goals while keeping the validity of the agreement. He may have made it to the throne, but it only served to amplify the flaws in his character, as evident by his mismanagement of the kingdom and letting it go to rot. A chronic fear still plagues him, that of a possible day of reckoning when Shrek would return to the kingdom, which he attempts to mitigate by capturing and enslaving the ogres. Quite fittingly, Stiltskin's ambiguity is used against him when Shrek attempts to cash in on the deal of a lifetime by turning himself in, but it's a testament to Stiltskin's exceptional cunning nature and quick thinking that he's able to find another loophole to salvage the situation, in the form of the caveat that Fiona is only half an ogre. Unfortunately for him, this proved to be insufficient in preventing his defeat, which was also a result of his arrogant complacency. In his premature celebration, while an army of rebels were right outside his gates. Deceitful, selfish, and attention-seeking, Stiltskin was a villain who took advantage of the plight of others, using them as stepping stones to further his own agenda, glorifying himself at the cost of their misery. Unable to learn the life lessons that were previously dealt to him, he persisted in his evil ways, leading to a fate that was worse off than before.